White House press secretary turned MSNBC host Jen Psaki spoke with Democratic Congressman Jamie Raskin about the House Oversight Committee chairman, Republican James Comer, suggesting that perhaps he has been, quote, co-opted by a foreign agent. This was during an interview on her Sunday show, Inside with Jen Psaki. Let's watch.
So how concerned are you that James Comer was the chairman of the committee, was knowingly, unknowingly working with, co-opted by a foreign agent?
I'm just concerned that the House Oversight Committee, which has a very proud history with, Congressman Waxman as chair, the great Elijah Cummings of Maryland as chair, is suddenly being compromised in a really serious way. Our legitimacy is being eroded by the tactics adopted by Chairman Comer.
Okay, I'm sorry. There's only one question here, right? Was there evidence that the Justice Department should have followed and investigated with respect to Hunter Biden, Joe Biden in this relationship, or wasn't there? I don't understand why so much of the mainstream media line of questioning is about, well, are you concerned about who's influencing who and a Russian agent? So many times, I'm not trying to diminish if there were foreign interference that would be relevant, but it's brought up in these contexts where the underlying question is of national relevance, regardless of if it might tacitly benefit Putin. We talked about this when at some point I was being asked about whether or not I'm concerned that Russia might be putting information out there to dissuade black voters from voting for Democrats because because black people in America aren't doing well.
Right.
I'm like, well, is that a lie? If it's the case that black people in America are feeling like the Democratic Party isn't serving them, that's on the Democratic Party to change their mind. And I similarly feel here, like at the end of the day, is the underlying question being addressed here in these kinds of colloquies? Are you convinced that all of the leads that might point to an inappropriate relationship between the Bidens and some foreign actor have been followed and found to be non-existent? Or is there a there with these claims that the Justice Department was biased at the hands of the Bidens themselves?
This is just what we hear from mainstream figures now all the time, that the source of the information is the most important thing, not whether the information is accurate or not, but we have to consider the main thing to consider is who's disseminating it. In this case, I take it that Psaki is referencing this Gal Luft person who was arrested or was sought in Cyprus or fled Cyprus. Right. It's a kind of a convoluted story. Who's made these sensational claims about his knowledge he would have, having also worked at one of these potential collusion companies.
And he's being charged with arms sales.
And is being charged with all these things, and he's trying to get out of it and saying, well, I have knowledge of Hunter Biden, so you should give me some kind of deal, and I'm not going to say anything until I have that deal in place. And honestly, Republicans should be a little bit wary of being taken for a ride by someone who has no real information. But Gary Shapley, this IRS whistleblower, has also made claims. He's come forward. He's not a Russian asset. He's not a. I mean, the way the mainstream media describes some of these people, you'd think they're all like, the second they're not on camera, they're like, yes, Mr. President, very good. We will bring down foreign government. Like it's not like it's Hydra or something. And that's just not the case. These are Americans with perfectly originating within our own country views and agendas and policies that have to be taken for face value. And the whole Russian election involvement storyline from 26 has just like permanently poisoned the brain of way too many people who are responsible for parsing and distributing the news.
Yeah, I was looking at, there was a New York Times op-ed last week that blew my mind. It was talking about how the Freedom Caucus has been able to, because it extracted concessions in their force the vote moment earlier this year, control the Rules Committee and try to get these amendments attached to the National Defense Authorization Act that would, among other things, cut funding to Ukraine and ban the provision of cluster bombs. And despite what many peace-oriented people think about that as a good, positive innovation, the New York Times characterized it as kind of Putin-sympathetic Republicans' attempt to cut Ukraine war funding. And that framing it's going to get you more and more out of touch with people who see you characterizing goals that they believe in as right-wing, as fascistic, as Putin sympathetic, And ultimately, you are going to have to contend with many Americans believing that the peace movement really does exist on the right. If the liberal paper of record is not even going to have any nuance in the article that acknowledges that some of the goals of the Freedom Caucus might be shared with liberals or the left. Other goals, of course, were not. They wanted to strip reproductive rights from service members and a lot of other things in the bill, which I personally obviously don't agree with.
Right. I mean, like, we could turn this. You could turn this on its head about anything. You could say, okay, the some Democrats, not actually even all that many elected Democrats necessarily, but mainstream media people have, preferred and pushed the wet market theory for COVID. That is a theory that the Chinese government would rather be the correct one, would rather be the talked about one. So, but no one, and if Republicans were pointing out constantly, that every time you bring
Chinese Communist Party,
every time you bring up the wet market theory, you are advancing the narrative of a hostile foreign power.
Yeah.
Are you being duped by foreign originated misinformation?
Not a Putin puppet, but a Xi lackey.
Exactly. I think the substantial reason that the lab leak was suppressed and that theory promoted instead was actually to shield U.S. scientists from scrutiny. This is what they preferred. I think and a little bit of not wanting to offend China, but again, but the theory is whatever the theory is.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. Maybe the Chinese government prefers it, and it happens to be right. The wet market, I don't think it is. I think we've seen a lot of evidence that it's not. But it doesn't. Whether they think about it doesn't change what you think about it.
I don't know,
there's some
Robby.
truth to it either way.
You sound like a she-shill.
I'm a she-shill. A she-shill? She-shills? Seashells by the seashore. All right, we're getting silly. We'll have more Rising right after this.